the oldest hominid fossil on our own lineage, branching off from other apes. I wonder why the death of the dinosaurs was in this league. I don't know.
Well, there's many levels. One is that a lot of this was driven by journalism, and the journalists, every kid in the world wants to know why the dinosaurs go extinct. It's like went extinct. But on the second level, when you think about science and what drives science, this was an attack on one of the oldest and most bedrock foundations of geology, the principle of uniformitarianism, 200 years old. And that principle from Hutton and Lyell, these ancient British geologists, all the way back to the late 1700s, early 1800s, was that there's nothing extraordinary about the past record of rocks on Earth. In fact, every aspect of rock building can be observed today. And this replaced what was then the idea called catastrophism, that it was a series of sequential catastrophes, floods of the earth or great heating periods, that would wipe out everything and stuff would come right back. God would recreate the world. It was strongly religious, and the whole flood myth was part of it. So here's the Alvarez coming and saying, oh no, we've never witnessed this. This is a neo-catastrophism. And boy, did that get blood boiling.
Yeah, and they also had this sort of, they also perceived as pretty haughty, these physicists and geologists coming in and telling biologists what's what.
Well, totally. And it was so interesting. I really traced back and you wanted to talk about aliens, I really traced back the first development of the field of astrobiology to the KT. For the first time, astronomers and paleontologists were in the same room. It never happened before. And it was such an interesting time because in actuality, we didn't even know how to talk to one another. It was very funny. I was at a conference where we geologists brought our 35 millimeter slides. You remember slide projectors? And all the astronomers brought these transparencies that you put on overhead projectors. And there was no slide projector, so we had this one-sided astronomical bent on those things. And you're indeed correct. Louis Alvarez set the tone, very unfortunately. He most famously said that when the paleontologists were not coming to and totally supporting him, and it took years to really find out from the paleontological record, he called paleontologists stamp collectors. And he was very in the middle of actually trying to trounce people's careers. There were some really ugly things that happened through this period.
And it's funny though, because I think that paleontologists really benefited from this because now it's paleontologists who can really tell us about these huge patterns in the history of life. Not someone who's focusing on generation by generation evolutionary change. It's to really these things happen all of a sudden that you can't just sort of project from what's happening right now.
Oh, absolutely. You're totally correct on this. And but during the fight, it was the paleontologists who were perceived as the bad guys and really the bad scientists.
Right. But you were a paleontologist who was willing to join the dark side, I guess.
Well, it's funny. I had a conversion. My work, you were right. Earlier in our conversation, you said that I was galvanized. The entire field of paleontology was, but I personally was, yes, indeed. I worked at Davis, California, which is only 60 miles from Berkeley. I was at the University of California, a different branch from the Alvarez's. But more importantly, I was on sabbatical in 1981, 1982, just 2 years afterward. The controversy was in full bloom at that time, and I happened to be, actually, just by pure accident, in a part of Europe where there were rocks of that age, and there were testable series of problems that I could get my particular expertise to work on. It was not so much the extinction of dinosaurs, and up to that time, really, the only creatures that had been examined by 82 were tiny microfossils. But it was mid-sized stuff, invertebrates. And again, here's where my ammonites came in. We know they went extinct then, but did they go out gradually or suddenly? And my first published work, I think came out in 1983 on this. The rocks I collected, admittedly few in number by that time, but it was a very gradual pattern. So I published this, and I was instantly embraced by the majority of paleontologists and those who very vehemently opposed this whole idea that A, we were hit and B, the after effects of the hit caused the extinction. The Alvarez is just as an example. I went and gave a talk at Berkeley, and they snubbed me. They wouldn't talk to me, and they walked out of the talk and on and on. And the funny deal is, by 2 years later, when much more work of mine showed that indeed it was catastrophic, I was their hero. They took me to dinner, wined and dined me. It was strange days. Fun, though. Absolutely fun.
Yeah. So, it's been, it's been almost 30 years now since the the Alvarez hypothesis came out, and
it's under attack again. Interestingly,
yeah. So in this time, like this image of you see this picture. I don't know who painted it, but like of dinosaurs looking off towards the horizon, and this big asteroid coming down and creating this kind of mushroom cloud type thing, and it's sort of almost like this icon of the apocalypse, sort of, I guess, in a way, and yet, there's still the scientific debate. I guess, does it still go on? I mean, what?
Well, yes and no. There's always been one person. Her name is Gerta Keller, a professor at Berkeley, and she's always been opposed.
Berkeley or Princeton?
I'm sorry, Princeton. Excuse me. Yes.
Okay.
The other opponent to it was a man named William Clemens, and he was at Berkeley. But yeah, Gerta continues to this day, and here's her point, and it's a pretty good one, as we'll see subsequent in this conversation. The other mass extinctions have always been associated with flood basalts. These are strange volcanic episodes where you don't have volcanoes like Mount St. Helens blowing their top. Instead, it's more like Hawaii, where you have cracks open up and the lava just dribbles out. Mm-hmm. But it does so over such large areas of the Earth's surface. It's not the lava that kills stuff, but it's the gases, the volcanic gases, and especially carbon dioxide. Mm-hmm. But here's Gerta's point. It turned out that at the time of the KT, 65 million years ago, one of the biggest of these flood basalts did occur. It's called the Deccan Traps. Now, I remain absolutely convinced that it was the asteroid that did the greatest amount of damage, but in all fairness, there was a flood basalt. And as we're going to see, the other flood basalts are absolutely related to and certainly coincident with the other mass extinction. So how could you say every one of the flood basalts did it except that particular one? So I suspect there's an influence from the volcanoes, and it may be the extinction was as bad as it was because we had two things happen.
Yeah, I'm always intrigued at how you can sort of try to disentangle all these different potential causes.
Well, I'm not sure you can, really. Not yet. Well, people are trying, but it's very, very difficult to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so 65 million years ago, right around the time this asteroid hit, so there's a flood basalts in, these are in India, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's what was going to become India. India was still really an island, really, large Australia-sized block that was heading hell-bent for the Asia, where it would so famously collide and produce the Himalayas as a consequence. But that was still way in the future. Mm-hmm. So yes, there were the big flood basalts covering large parts of India that had to have had climate change effects on our planet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.